Okay, so diagonal arch and curl is what this video is about. You should do a couple passes of arch and flatten, or if I've cued for you flatten and arch, you should do that first. The idea with diagonal arch and curl is that we're moving one hip and the opposite shoulder. So they'll curl in and then they'll arch out. So the diagonal is going to be opposite shoulder to opposite hip. It's easiest to do this lying down. And so you should be able to watch a bit as I do this. So you've already started to sense and feel. You've done a couple passes of arch and flatten. We're going to start with the hips first. So let's do left hip and right shoulder. What I want to do first is, I might have in our private session cued you to do the flatten first, or I might have cued you to do the arch piece first. So whatever I told you to do that one first, and then just listen. So I'm going to start with the curl first, the flatten piece. So come and join me, or if I told you to do arch first, then just wait for a moment. So this hip, if you can find this bony landmark, like on my pants, it's this like little ring where my belt should go. But you're gonna have this one piece of your pelvis that sticks out quite a bit. It's sort of this area that you want, I think, is the guiding focus. And when I curl this hip up and in towards my belly button, you're gonna notice that I didn't lift my hip off the ground. All I did was shift it up and in towards my belly button. Right, I'm trying to get this line between belly button and hip closer. So I lifted just a teeny bit right here, but my pelvis didn't go off the ground. Right, so there's a little bit of a tightening there. And I'm gonna really slowly release that. And if it's helpful to put your hand on the hip, that's great. So again, lift up towards the belly button. And see how slowly and smoothly you can come out of this. Making sure you're breathing. Take a full breath when you're done. Maybe take one more pass. Get yourself used to it. Let that hip come back to where it was, drawing away from the center of you. And then let's bring the shoulder up to meet it. So this shoulder is going to go up towards the ceiling and then come in towards the belly button as if it wants to meet that hip. So the hip will come up towards the belly button and reach across towards that opposite shoulder. You should feel like your back is sort of curling beneath you, or curved, as you flatten along a diagonal, and then slowly draw those 2 points away. Shoulder and hip go back to where they were. And try that again. Curl the hip and the shoulder in towards each other. You should feel those front body muscles tightening. Curled back as you slowly release. Let this be like a yawn. You're breathing really slowly. Let those muscle fibers release back. Remember, the therapy piece is in the slow release, controlling to the last millimeter of your fibers. And do maybe one more pass. Curl that hip up, curl the shoulder in, feel those front body muscles tightening, and really slowly release. Nice. So now let's move into the arch. So jump in if you paused. So now we're going to have the left, this focus hip go heavy, press it into the ground. I found the idea of doing that really elusive when I first started doing this. What has made it easier for me is thinking about if I wanted to lift my left foot off the ground, but I didn't, I would start to engage these muscles, which then pulls my left hip down into the mat a bit more. So you could do either way. You can press that left hip down. Your right hip will kind of lift just a touch, just a touch. It's not coming off the ground, it's just shifting towards the ceiling a little bit. Or imagine you're lifting that focus foot off the ground and it's going to dip that hip into the ground. So try that a couple times, seeing as you can come slowly in that contraction, slowly out of that contraction. Noticing as you do, did it feel easier to curl and flatten? Or does it feel easier to press down and make that hip heavy? So let's bring the shoulder in. The opposite shoulder is going to go backwards. So I'm going to press the shoulder into the ground, and I'm going to press that focus hip into the ground. And I'm noticing that my trunk has lifted off the ground a bit on a diagonal. And I have a diagonal arch in my back as it diagonals from the focus hip to the opposite shoulder. And then really slowly release. Come back if you need to shift a little bit to fully flattened on the ground. Take a breath. And then let's try that again. Into the arch, pressing the hip into the ground, pressing the opposite shoulder into the ground, noticing that bowed arch in your back. And then so gradually kind of radiating out from the center of your back and letting those muscle fibers get long as you release both shoulder and hip. And now let's move in the opposite direction. Lengthen these low back, these back muscles by curling the shoulder and the focus hip inward. Right? Abdominals are tightening now, but your back muscles are longer. And then again, yawn out of that. And let's naturally flow slowly and deliciously into the arch piece. Hip and shoulder press into the ground. This should feel good. I only want you to move as big as it feels delicious. If you start to effort, too much. Don't do it. No need. So you're flowing in and out of this diagonal arch, hip and opposite shoulder pressing into the ground, gently letting them release, maybe pausing in the middle for a moment in a breath, and then sweetly and kindly curling in on a diagonal. Just to your comfort, just as long as it feels delicious. Keep breathing. Come to completion. Let legs go long if that feels comfortable for you, and maybe get a sense of the difference from one hip to the other, one shoulder to the other. Maybe even as you slip your hands underneath your low back, you can notice that the arch is different on one side than the other. Maybe one side, maybe one hip, one shoulder feel more connected to the earth, more grounded, maybe a clear connection, right? Just from your brain to these pieces of your body. Maybe there's some ease, some relief. If this arch and flatten can undo quite a bit. So it's really important to stabilize before you go back to the opposite side. So by stabilizing, we can go into a normal arch and flatten, or flatten and arch, whichever one I've told you to do. Maybe even notice that as you're doing the arch or the flatten, one side feels smoother than the other. Like one is a clear driver and the other one maybe feels like a sticky passenger. Complete whichever piece your arch and flatten you're on. And then I'm going to ground your feet into the ground. Feel that pressure coming through your pelvis and into your spine to sort of stabilize you. Maybe tick-tock the knees back and forth, only if this feels comfortable to you. Just a little bit here and there. And then you can go on to the other side. Play this video again in order to clean out the other side for diagonal arch and curl.